I want to hear cannons. Downfield, pull up, ball to the 5, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans does it again. Fire the cannons, Bucs.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Those up with the head. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25. He's gone. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, Bucs fans, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. We are back with more Buccaneers news and updates as we get ready for the start of NFL training camp. Bucs are officially back in the facility this week. The rookies reported on Monday to Advent Health Training Center. The veterans report Tuesday, and the first training camp practice, Evan, will be on Wednesday, July 24th. It feels like we are finally out of the dark ages here and back into some regular football activity. And this isn't just OTAs. This isn't mini camp. This isn't anything like that. This is training camp. This is where, for lack of a better term here, the men are separated from the boys. Football's back.
Pretty much is. Yeah, it's I think by it was Adam Schefter or somebody said that by Tuesday or Wednesday, pretty much every team, like every NFL team, will be like back pretty much in full swing. Because teams have different times their rookies come in or their veterans come in, but by like Tuesday, I think everybody is pretty much in. So yeah, I mean, obviously the first couple of days, the Bucs will be practicing starting on Wednesday morning. First couple of days, as per usual, will be, just in shorts and a t-shirt, like shells, basically, as they call them, kind of. Be kind of like a little bit of an extension of OTAs, somewhat. But then you're going to get to pads, and then you're going to be getting ready to, see actual action here. Offensive linemen, defensive linemen, beating each other up every day in the, Tampa heat, every morning. So, it's definitely exciting. And now we're finally going to be able to analyze something new. Before we know it, we got, 2.5 weeks until the first preseason game or so. So there's actually going to be new stuff to analyze. So that's always fun.
Yeah, that first preseason game going to be on August 9th against the Tennessee Titans. And then obviously after that, the Buccaneers have the rest of their preseason games, and their season opener will be on September 7th in Atlanta against the Falcons. Back in the spring, people got excited. You got your first real look at this year's batch of rookies in action. Again, short t-shirts. We call it the Kenny Bell effect whenever people get really hyped up around short and t-shirt workouts. But as you had alluded to, the pad's going to be coming on soon, and fans going to get another look at this batch of Buccaneer rookies. And wanted to mention the rookies to start the show. We have got some pretty big news here to kick off the week as well. Benjamin Morrison, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers second-round pick, has agreed to terms with the team. He gets 96% guaranteed in the third year of his deal. And I think the reason that this rookie signing is maybe a little more important than some that we have heard about in the past, really, I don't want to say the most important second-round pick in Buccaneers history, but with the added contract details and the increasing trend of guaranteed money being thrown at second-round picks this season in the NFL, a lot of people were anxiously waiting for Morrison to put pen to paper here, and earlier this week on Monday, he gets it done. The Buccaneers officially sign their draft class. So after a mini crisis, if you will, of kind of waiting around to see what was going to happen with this guy, he will be ready to go for training camp this week. A collective sigh of relief among the fan base here as Morrison gets the deal done.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the Houston Texans basically started the trend. It might have been, was it Jalen Noel that they gave a fully guaranteed deal to, who's a second round pick. And when one thing happens, if you're a second round pick, you're like, well, he got that, why can't I? So basically, yeah, it was a holdout for a lot of these guys. And there were some guys like Trey Harris of the Chargers actually threatened to hold out of training camp. Now, I don't think it ever got that far between Benjamin Morrison and the Buccaneers. But yeah, it's still good that the deal got done. I always expected it to get done. I didn't really have any doubts. But at least the Bucs are not the Bengals right now. Because the Bengals are dealing with their star pass rusher not wanting to play on their deal, their first round pick not wanting to sign a deal. So yeah, the Bengals are a mess right now. But yeah, the Bucs officially signed their full draft class. Benjamin Morrison will be, I think, good to go. I don't really think, coming off the injury, I don't really know right now if there's going to be any limitations for him in camp right off the bat. So we'll have to wait and see how he's used, starting on Wednesday. But definitely, I think one of the more exciting draft picks of the Buccaneers whole draft class for a lot of people. They've been wanting that guy that has the potential. Not saying he's going to reach this, but has the potential to be a cornerback one per se. And I think a guy like Benjamin Morrison could reach that. So I think a lot of Bucs fans are going to be having their eye closely on him in this preseason.
Yeah, and whenever you size up these rookie classes, you're looking at the guys who can come in and basically impact this team right away. Morrison is a guy who can do that. Jacob Parrish is a guy who can do that, especially when you look at the depth needs that they had. Guys were going down with injury in the secondary last year, and it got very ugly very quickly. So you're hoping that, some of these rookies there in the secondary can kind of soften the blow, if you will. But these are guys who can contribute, and I am excited to see them in the lineup. Glad to see that it has officially been
taken care of.
Yes, yeah,
yeah.
God.
It's just again, it's not something you wanted to linger on. Just because again, it's like you could be potentially losing important reps, right? For a rookie, in training camp. Those are, I mean, we've seen it, like one of the big reasons why we were like, well, Kalijah Kancey had an okay rookie year, but it could have been much better had he not missed his entire training camp pretty much.
Yeah.
And then, he misses part time in the season, and yeah, that definitely hurt. So yeah, you definitely want your rookies to get as many reps before the season as possible. Because it can only help, with the certain things, when it comes to developing those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So diving a little bit more into some of the top headlines here to kickstart training camp. There is a notable absence in this wide receiver room, and a lot of people saw this coming. This isn't necessarily breaking news, but Chris Godwin, not present at the start of training camp, still rehabbing that ankle that ended his season last year. Now, it hasn't officially been reported yet that he will start on the PUP. It has been reported that Tristan Wirfs will start the season on PUP. He will miss the first 4 games of the season. Now, there are conflicting reports. Again, nothing official has come out and said that Chris Godwin will start on the PUP list. With that being the working assumption, Evan, the expectation is that he'll still miss some kind of time at the start of the season. I think a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, we were on this show kind of debating how many games he'll miss to start the year. If it's not enough to land him on the PUP, but they still expect him to rehab deep into the preseason, do you think he's ready to go week 1? And how many games do you ultimately think he misses? Because, I mean, right now, a lot of people are going to say the same thing. Don't put him back in the lineup until he's 100%. But on the same hand, he's a natural competitor. He's going to want to play. Chris Godwin is just one of those guys who's going to want to be in the lineup, and he's going to want to contribute on the offensive side of the ball, which he is able to do. So what does this situation look like to you? Is it, a more no news at this point with the start of training camp? It's just kind of a refresh of the headlines from before, or do you see any kind of substantial update here on Godwin soon?
Well, the other thing is, you say, yeah, they don't want to risk it and stuff like that, but at the same time, and you mentioned Ev Godwin's a competitor. Obviously, yeah, he's going to want to get out there. But the Bucs are also a worse team without Chris Godwin.
Yeah.
Like they are a worse offense without Chris Godwin. So they want him out there. Now, I do agree that they're not going to rush him, especially with the wide receiver room that they have right now, right? When you still have Mike Evans and you invest the 19th overall draft pick in a wide receiver, yeah, like you're hoping that 19th overall pick, like if he needs to be wide receiver 2 for a month, 2 months, like you're hoping he can handle it, because if he can't, that might be, some red flags. As far as Godwin goes, I think they're gonna want to wait and try and avoid the PUP list. So the PUP is the physically unable to perform list, which if you're put on it, it means you're automatically out for 4 games. No matter what, at what point in the season you're put on there. If you're put on there, whatever, after week one, it's 4 games after that. It's automatically 4 games. I believe you cannot practice with the team. You can rehab. So if you're rehabbing an injury, so that's what Tristan Wirfs, will do while he's on it. He's already been put on it. You can rehab and try and get healthy, but I don't believe you can practice or anything with the team. So it did come out that Godwin will not be, to start training camp at least, will not be participating in any team activities. He's definitely, I mean, even if he starts a practice at some point, let's say it's mid-August and he starts a practice, he's not going to get into any preseason game. They're not going to do that. I think they're going to really try and manage, his workload in training camp if he does return. And the Bucs have an opportunity. I don't think there's a deadline for them to have to put him on the PUP list. I don't think it's like a date that he has to be on there. So they may want to see how he looks right now, and how he's responding to certain things with rehab, and then maybe, make that decision because ideally, I don't really think they want to have both Tristan Wirfs and Chris Godwin automatically missing the first 4 games of the season. I don't think. I think in their perfect world, yes, maybe Chris Godwin misses a game or two, but I think they'd like to avoid having both of them out like the first month of the year.
Yeah, and as you had kind of alluded to as well, if you rush him back, the last thing you want is for this to become a lingering issue.
Yes.
A lingering injury that pops up throughout the year, because that's happened with plenty of great talents, and it can tank a promising year for any NFL player, and we know the talent that Chris Godwin brings to the table. But as we talk about this wide receiver room in Tampa Bay, there's going to be a lot of discussion and a lot of eyeballs on who ultimately makes the team. We kind of dive into our training camp battles here, if you will. Evan, there's gonna be an odd man out in that wide receiver room, and I'm just gonna run the names by you.
A pretty good one too.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talent. There is a lot of talent. Mike Evans said last month that this may be the most talented wide receiver room he's ever played in. Now, he says that every year. He even acknowledged that he said that every year. But when you talk about the potential that all of these guys have, it certainly feels like an upswing compared to, honestly, even headed into last year. I know that we really saw the Buccaneers' depth at wide receiver spread as thin as it possibly could be when you're playing Kansas City and Ryan Miller is one of your top 2 options there. So it's been bad, but I'd like to believe that if everybody stays healthy, everybody can produce and really show us a lot of things this year. But here is the situation at wide receiver. So last year, headed into week 1, the Buccaneers only rostered 5 wide receivers. Let's just assume that they carry 6 this year for the extra depth, right? Mike Evans, your number 1. Chris Godwin is kind of a wild card here because you don't know if he's available for week 1, but you want to assume he's taking up a roster spot at this point. So Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Emeka Egbuka, and Jalen McMillan. Those are your big 4.
Yeah, and if they do decide to put Godwin on the PUP list, I believe it's not like IR. He still does take up a roster spot. So it's not like you can say, oh, you just put him on the PUP list. He still would take up a roster spot.
There are 5 names behind the big 4, and we got to figure out where they end up. Trey Palmer, Raheem Jarrett, Cameron Johnson, Sterling Shepard, all guys who have been on this team. And then, of course, the rookie, Tez Johnson. So I'm just going to toss it to you. We can address whichever player you want first. I know there's a lot of hype around Tez Johnson. We are fans of Tez Johnson on this show, but it gets to be a tricky situation when you talk about his path to making the final 53-man roster. So there's all kind of angles we can look at this wide receiver room. It's going to be entertaining. There's going to be some fireworks. There's going to be guys playing their asses off in training camp coming up this month. How do you see things shaking out here? What is your loose prediction for the wide receiver room?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think just like I said earlier, they're going to be potentially letting 1 or 2 guys go that you could see end up on another NFL team, shortly.
They'll be Jaguars. They'll be Jaguars.
Obviously, Sterling Shepard has the connection with Baker Mayfield. The Bucs, brought him back in the offseason, which I wasn't really sure if they were going to or not. whatever, it's fine. Good veteran leadership. I think he's well liked in the locker room, so I don't really mind that. Obviously, the Bucs aren't lacking veteran leadership there, but it is what it is. The one I'm interested in talking about because it seems I just don't really hear much about, and it's kind of overshadowed a little bit. And I think he is in danger of not being on this team. Trey Palmer, though. I think maybe it's because Trey Palmer's role was very reduced last season with Jalen McMillan coming in. But even when McMillan was in there, and they were without Chris Godwin for basically half the season, Trey Palmer wasn't really as effective. So his rookie season, he had 39 catches, 385 yards, and three receiving touchdowns. Last season, 12 catches, just 12 catches, 172 yards, and one touchdown. Only 22 targets last year compared to 68 the year before. So obviously his usage went down a whole lot in Liam Cohen's offense. Now, Josh Grizzard, however you want to pronounce it. I'm going to figure it out at some point. Now, how is he going to use him, right? That we don't know, right? We don't know. Obviously, Liam Cohen did not envision a big role for Trey Palmer. Dave Canales did. It's also the things that, they had, right? Dave Canales didn't have Jalen McMillan. At that point, Chris Godwin was still not quite, I think he was, a year removed, right? A season removed from the injury. So still kind of working himself back in. So he had a couple of different things. Obviously, didn't have a Mecca Ibuka either. So I'm curious to see how Grizzard does it. But I think Trey Palmer has been has had flashes. I think the Bucs wanted him to sort of take the reins on that punt slash kick return role. Hasn't really worked out. Now you got Tez Johnson, who seemingly can do those types of things. And I think the Bucs are going to see in training camp if he can do those things and how effective he is, because I think that might be the inside edge there, right? Who has the inside track? I think it's going to be whoever is better at returner. Let's say if they do keep six wide receivers, I would say I think Shepard is one of them for sure, and then I think it's down to Tez Johnson or Trey Palmer, and I think it might honestly be whoever plays special teams better, because the Bucs have been looking for that type of returner. Not you don't have to be Devin Hester, but like they're looking for somebody who, if the offense is struggling one game, let's say in the fourth quarter they got 10 points, looking for somebody to flip the field, maybe put a little juice into the stadium, right? Provide a spark, and they haven't gotten that from that position in a long time. So I think if it comes down to those two guys, it's going to be whoever makes more of an impact on special teams. And I do wonder if they decide that Trey Palmer's the odd man out. I do wonder if they receive some phone calls about him, maybe by some teams that don't want to, deal with waivers, or don't want to, maybe if he does pass waivers, becomes a free agent, they don't want to deal with it. They're like, hey, we'll throw you a sixth round pick or whatever, which was what Trey Palmer was, in the first place. I do wonder that, but that'll be interesting to see. And I think Tez Johnson versus Trey Palmer, kind of versus Sterling Shepard, is kind of one of the bigger battles for this entire season. We were talking before we went on the air about how there really isn't that big training camp battle that you can really pinpoint and say, wow, this is a big one. This is probably one of the bigger ones here.
Now, let me ask you again. You brought up kind of the special teams ability, the returner ability. This is a multi-part question. Do you think Cam Johnson has a legitimate chance here to compete with Tez as a returner? Because I know that a lot of people have Cameron Johnson in mind for that position. Now, he's not a shoo-in, because I think even more people just at this point assume Tez is going to make the team and be that guy. But one, do you think Cameron Johnson has a fighting chance here? And two, do you buy the Tez Johnson hype? Because I think we've talked about it briefly before, and I like Tez. I'm rooting for Tez to make the final 53. I would like to see him make the team. There's already a ton of hype surrounding the guy, so you'd like to see it pay off. But, I mean, truthfully, if he can't deliver as a returner and he can't find reps in a crowded wide receiver room full of talent, where does that leave him? Are the Bucs ready to bank on the hype that the rest of the fan base is already banking on? Or do you think that there are some more serious conversations there to be had?
And I think if he doesn't make an impact on special teams, I think that's where maybe it's like, oh, well, maybe if they're going to keep six, maybe it's Shepard and Palmer instead of Tez Johnson. Cameron Johnson got an opportunity last. I know there was a lot of hype about Cam Johnson last year for a guy who didn't like couldn't was like
He
injured.
was he was the training camp darling. I mean,
He
again,
was he was and he didn't play.
yeah, we talk about it. We talk about it every year. We call it the Kenny Bell effect. I'm sure I've already said it 2 or 3 times on this episode alone, but that guy was Cameron Johnson last year.
Yeah, but that was the weird thing. He like barely played in training camp, and they were like, "Oh, this guy's a lock to make the team." I was like, "Why?" like, um, but they did a couple of things with him. I think they did like a cool end around with him at some point last year. Again, that's a different offense. We don't know what Josh Grizzard's going to want to do. Raheem Jarrett also. I mean, he had 9 catches for 124 yards last year, so he got some play. That's another guy who I would expect Raheem Jarrett. I don't know if he can go on the practice squad at this point, but I would expect Raheem Jarrett to not be on this team. And I do think I think Cameron Johnson, I think it's kind of a 1-year deal. I think with them getting Tez Johnson, spending a draft pick on getting Tez Johnson as well. I think that sort of shows you what they maybe think about not only Cameron Johnson but also Tez Johnson's potential there. So I think Cam Johnson, that hype ship has kind of sailed a little bit, but all it takes is one good camp. That's all it takes, and you're gonna be part of a bigger discussion all of a sudden. Like I said, that's all it takes, and we'll see what ends up happening there.
Yeah, and as we talk a little bit more about Josh Grizzard, some of his tendencies early on in the season as the new Buccaneers offensive coordinator, the elephant in the room is going to be the absence of Tristan Wirfs. And I think not only seeing how Grizzard can get the most out of these young wide receivers, but really get the most out of the rest of this offense when you're missing your cornerstone player on the offensive line, it's going to be very, very interesting. We'll dive a little bit deeper on that in the future, but let's get to another position group. And Evan, this might be the training camp battle. We said at the top of the show, there's not a lot. This might be the training camp battle. I mean, all the fans that I talk to, you go on Twitter, everybody is hyped up about Kyle Trask versus Michael Pratt here at QB2.
They're all picking a side.
Yeah, they are all picking a side, drawing a line in the sand. This one, obviously, at surface value, isn't going to be as interesting as some of these other battles that we have talked about. But you had brought up an interesting point before the show. Whoever loses this QB battle, I mean, may as well have taken some of their last reps in Tampa. Is that a correct assumption here?
Possibly. I think especially if it's Trask. Like I wonder if they try and get Trask on the practice squad as like one of them veterans. I just wonder if some other team just picks him up.
Right.
Now, I mean, look, he was a free agent, a couple months ago, and any team could have signed him and he elected to come back to the Bucs. So maybe the interest isn't really there. I'm not 100% sure. The interest quite possibly may not be there. But I feel like because Pratt was on the practice squad last year, so they might be able to sneak him on there yet again. Trask, though, if he were to be cut and then put on the practice squad, feels like somebody else might end up, picking him up. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But I mean, it is interesting because I think this is like the first time in a little bit that Trask has some legit competition for the backup role, and I do think that the Bucs really like Michael Pratt. They wanted to draft Michael Pratt in his year. They weren't able to get him, and the Packers cut him, and lo and behold, the Bucs were able to pick him up a little bit later. But and obviously the Bucs like Trask to a certain extent as well, or else they would have just let him go. They didn't have to re-sign him. So I do find it interesting, and I'm going to be keeping it because Baker Mayfield's going to play very sparingly in this preseason. So I'm curious to see the reps and who gets what, right? Like, does Trask get the first call? I would guess he probably does. Or do they try and really see what Pratt has? Like, do they try and sort of see like if they have a different backup here? I'm curious to see that, but yeah, it's a fun little battle there.
I feel like Michael Pratt's got more trading cards for the Bucs right now than even Kyle Trask does.
Yeah,
like
well, they're all in a Packers uniform.
Right.
It's annoying.
Yeah, depending on where you find him, you can get him in an unlicensed Buccaneers uniform if you pull him out of like Topps Chrome or something like that. But
like the optics have
yeah,
him in a package, and then it says Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the bottom or whatever.
those
I
are
think
always
the Prism ones though, I think still say Green Bay Packers. I think.
those are always the goofiest looking cards to me.
Yeah,
I hate them.
I don't even like collecting them. Like I feel weird getting them.
So
Doesn't look right
again,
to me.
another position battle on the offensive side of the ball to keep track of. It's not going to be as flashy as the wide receiver battle, but I do think there are some long-term repercussions for what would be the QB2. And I mean, I think that the situation that you had posed where if Kyle Trask loses this battle and he gets, I hate to say demoted to the practice squad, but when you're Kyle Trask, when you're a second round pick, that's really what it would be. It would be a demotion after 4 years now of being QB2 on this team. So
Yeah.
it'd be an interesting situation. It'd also be interesting to see what kind of actual market value he could have, right? Like what teams are interested. There are a couple of teams that could be QB needy. You know, Tennessee Titans could be a team that scoop them up because Will Levis
Maybe,
now out for the season. And behind Cam Ward, they got just a bunch of dudes. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. But let's get over to the other side of the football here as we talk more about these position battles. This one is just a battle to make the team, but it's a couple of guys who have stuck around on the roster now, and they've had, in their own right, they've had some pretty decent preseason performances. Some of them have even bled over to the regular season, but I want to highlight the outside linebacker position, and I want to highlight two players here, Jose Ramirez and Marquise Watts, who, again, if you've been watching this Buccaneers defensive line at all over the last 2 seasons, you have most certainly heard these guys' names brought up, and now it looks like it may possibly be one or the other here.
Yeah, it definitely could be. I mean, two guys the Bucks have really been, trying to develop pretty much over the last couple of seasons. Jose Ramirez, obviously, the Bucks have invested, a draft pick in him a couple of years ago. Marquise Watts has always sort of been like a pretty solid depth player for them. So, yeah, I think that's an intriguing battle there. Obviously, the Bucks, they didn't completely transform their outside linebacker room this offseason. Rearrange some things. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka leaves. Hassan Reddick comes in. David Walker comes in. So it's not like we're looking at it and like, oh boy, well both these guys might be gone. Like, no, I think there's probably a spot for one of them maybe. Especially because, with them positions where you're playing a little bit more physical brand, right, of football, where you're on the rushing the passer, you'll be getting hit a little bit more, playing a little more physical. Injuries can pile up. So I think they would like to probably have one on the practice squad, one on the roster. I think that's in an ideal world. We'll see if they can get to that ideal world or not. They have in the past, they've been able to do it, but I like both guys. I would probably, if it was just up to me, I would like to see what Ramirez has a little bit more, just because I think the ceiling is slightly higher with a guy like him. But I do think that's like an underrated battle to watch. And Marquise Watts could be a guy who has been on the team for a couple of years that the Bucks could end up cutting here.
There is a guy on the team, former draft pick, who I think really in this outside linebacker room is in, I don't want to say trouble, but he is most certainly on the hot seat. And I wanted
he's not getting cut, but you'd like to see a little bit more.
He's not getting cut, but you would like to see a little bit more. And I think the presence of a rookie David Walker emphasizes this point even more. I want to bring up Chris Brazwell and talk about not only his progress, but where the Bucs expect him to be this season. It really does feel like he's going to have to do something to separate himself or break the mold or show clear signs of development before a lot of people, fans included, just kind of move on from the guy. And I mean that in the most respectful way possible. I think there was probably a more delicate way I could have put that. But the truth of the matter is, I mean, the way that I look at it and the things that I'm hearing, man, it seems like the Buccaneers are ready to put more stock into David Walker at outside linebacker than they are Chris Brazwell. And I mean, the film will show you that. But I think Brazwell is in a pretty tough spot here, especially if David Walker can be someone who breaks out. Now, limited reps, these guys are going to be fighting to get on the field at some point this season, but I do think it is a bad situation for Brazwell to be in. Not bad, but an uphill battle, if you will.
Yeah, so to me, it's weird with Chris Braswell because even like the entire year last year, and even like a little bit once we got into the offseason, the way people talked about him, you would have thought he was like some. It was like, oh my God, year three, year four, and we're still waiting on Chris Braswell. Like it
Right.
was his rookie season.
Yeah.
Like he's had one season. And also the other thing is like he was a second round pick. Like it's not like this guy was like some fifth, sixth round pick. Like the Bucks just took a flyer on. He's picking the second round for a reason. I think the Bucks, obviously, because they invested a high draft pick in him, would like to see him turn it around, have a pretty productive, preseason. But I also think they won't be afraid to give reps to the best guy, right? If they feel that David Walker has earned more reps over Chris Braswell, so be it. Braswell obviously got very limited time last year, and which like that's not a great sign, right? Because it's not a great sign because the Bucks outside linebacker room, it wasn't like
It,
it was stacked,
right.
like
Right.
it wasn't like it was like, oh my God, there's nowhere for him to go. There was opportunities for him to play and just didn't really seize it. Did have 1.5 sacks, sort of came towards the end of the season. But I do want to see a little bit more before I put, a full like report on him pretty much. But I mean, first year wasn't great. I'm not going to say that it was. He needs to show more, but I'm willing to give him a little bit more time here. And I think the Bucks are too, but I also think the Bucks are looking at it and saying, well, the leash is now a lot shorter than it was just 12 months ago.
Yeah, and we've talked about it on the show before where when you try and develop a pass rusher, specifically these guys who do line up on the edge of the line of scrimmage, it takes time, man. Some of these guys don't blossom until 2, 3, 4 years into the thing, and then every now and again you get a generational guy like Jared Verse, and then everybody has to reevaluate their own expectations for their own defensive players. But I mean, he's not off schedule. It just certainly feels like if he doesn't show up here soon, he could get lapped by younger talent. I mean, I think that it's going to be interesting to see how David Walker translates to the NFL because let's not forget, I mean, he was an absolute monster in college, but he was playing lesser competition, right?
Yes, much lesser, yes.
Right. So you got to take it for what it is. And once we finally see him in pads lining up against NFL level offensive linemen, it'll be interesting to see just how impactful he can be. But as of right now, if we're riding the hype machine, seems like David Walker is coming in a lot more hot than Chris Braswell. But I mean, we'll see. Push will come to shove at some point.
We're going to have some answers here, pretty much from here on out. Like every show we do, we'll get a little bit more answers on a lot of these questions that we're asking right now. So, we'll get a little bit more. And that's that's the fun part, right? You don't have to sit here and, all right, well, we speculated about this week. What are we doing next week? The same thing. Like, no, like we're gonna be able to have at least some stuff to talk about here and be like, okay, well, looking like we were right here, looking like we're wrong here, or this and that. And yeah, that's the exciting part.
I'm excited. Actual football, actual results, stuff that you can put on the TV and you can say, okay, that's where that went wrong. That's where this needs to be fixed. There is no more speculatory, in theory, let's just
Hypothetical,
pretend.
yeah.
We're done with it. Football is back. I'm very excited. Let's wrap up today's show with one final position group here. And there's a couple of players I want to talk about because we have talked endlessly this offseason about depth in the secondary. And there are two players in this secondary, specifically the safety room, who I think are, again, going to be in an interesting situation with training camp coming up. Shiloh Sanders being the first and more popular, and Kayvon Merriweather being the other one. Looking at the safety room and the way that things are coming together, is it one of these guys or the other? Is it one makes the final 53 and the other one heads to the practice squad? Or, is there a scenario where, I don't think there's a scenario where neither one of these guys make the team, but let me just ask you about Shiloh first and foremost. How do you feel about his situation in comparison to a Kayvon Merriweather?
Well, on Shiloh Sanders, yeah, like in terms of like popularity, he's probably one of the more popular guys on the freaking team.
Yeah.
Like the fifth string safety. Um, Yeah, I think when it comes to obviously Merriweather, made the team last year, so he did some good things last year in camp and the preseason. Obviously has the experience, and I think Shiloh probably has an uphill battle just because of that experience that Merriweather has. I think there's some talent there with Shiloh, but feels like he's more of a project type. So I would think that Kayvon Merriweather probably has the upper hand when we're talking about that. But the Bucks have a couple guys, and obviously with their safeties, like there's guys like Tyke Smith. Obviously, they're moving him to safety pretty much full time this season. But we saw last year he can play nickel. So like, yeah, he's listed as a safety, but like doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be a safety. Obviously, Antoine Phil Jr. can play a little bit of nickel as well. They got Christian Izzian still there who can play safety and a little bit of nickel. So there's a lot of guys, a lot of versatility in the safety room there. So that's where I think that maybe if let's say when the final rosters come out and maybe they're a little light on cornerback, right? Maybe the guys that are listed as corners, maybe there's only 4 or 5 guys, but there's maybe 6 safeties, right? I think that's where you can maybe see that. And a guy like Kayvon Merriweather or Shiloh Sanders, I think, could get in there. Obviously, Marcus Banks is another guy. JJ Roberts from Marshall is undrafted free agent. I know the Bucks like him a good bit. Seems like another practice squad guy. At the start at least, but we'll wait and see. But I think Shiloh, and obviously it's going to be easy to tell because he's going to get a lot of exposure, right? There's going to be a lot of chatter throughout training camp, throughout the preseason games about him when he's on the field. So we're going to be able to see him a lot, I think, and we're going to be able to get again a lot of our answers there. But I think right now Merriweather probably has the upper hand. Um, you know, Probably, like if I had to guess. Rashad Wisdom is another guy in the safety room there who played a little bit last year. But like I said, I think Kayvon Merriweather made the team last year. Probably has the upper hand over Shiloh Sanders this year, even though I know there's a lot of Bucs fans that probably want Shiloh Sanders to make the team just out of training camp.
It is kind of insane. I can't remember another undrafted free agent who has come into Tampa and probably become, I don't want to say top 5 most popular player on the team because like you've got the big 5, you've got Baker, you've got Mike, you've got Tristan Wirfs, you've got your guys like Antoine Winfield, you've got Chris Godwin, things like that. Bucky Irving becoming a relatively new name to be popular.
He's probably top 10 though. He's probably like
he
in that
really
9,
is,
10
and
spot.
he's putting a lot of work and a lot of effort into making sure that you see him off of the field as well. I'm sure people have seen it, but if you haven't, go check out his YouTube channel, Shiloh Sanders. Literally just this week, he did a challenge at a local KFC, not very far from my house, actually, where he tried to give away 250 free meals as quickly as he possibly could. It's a pretty good time. I mean,
easy, buddy. You haven't made the team yet.
I know, right? But you can just tell, like, he's having fun, soaking up every minute that he has down here. There was a really cool moment where he's in the middle of doing this vlog, giving away KFC, and some guy rolls up to the drive-thru with a 28 Shiloh Sanders jersey. He signed it for him, and he said that's the first.
Was it a Bucs jersey?
Yeah, it was a Buccaneers jersey, number 28, Shiloh Sanders. So he got the updated one because you remember when he signed with the Bucs, people were making their own. They had number 21 all over it. Benjamin Morrison ends up getting number 21. So they moved Shiloh to number 28 in the
Vernon
video.
Hargraves who?
Huh?
No, I mean a Vernon Hargraves joke.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jesus.
It's like one of the last like notable guys in the secondary were 28. So.
Yeah, went right over my head there. But anyways, he's slinging chicken from KFC, and a guy rolls up wearing a 28 Bucs jersey, Shiloh Sanders. He signs it.
That's crazy.
And he says that was the first Buccaneers jersey he had ever signed. So I'm hoping that's the case. It makes for a really good story. And
hopefully it's the first of many, huh? How about that?
No, I think that Shiloh is really, really making it hard for people who dislike him, right?
Yeah,
like it's easy to root for the guy, and I'm glad to see that he is fitting in.
At the end of the day, though, he's got to be productive on the field.
Yeah,
like it just you gotta be productive on the field. It doesn't mean you could be the most likable guy of all time. Like, if that was the case, Jameis Winston would still be the team's quarterback. Like it wasn't good enough on the field. Like that's that's what it is. like if that were the case, there'd be a lot of guys that would still be, with their current team, still be in the NFL if they were just likable dudes. But you gotta be able to go out there on the field, and you gotta be able to be productive, and that's ultimately what's going to be the determining factor on whether he's here for only a month or two, or if he's here much longer.
Oh, you're right. I couldn't have said it better myself. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's just about going to do it for today's episode of the Cannon Fire podcast. We will obviously keep you updated along the way with more training camp news regarding the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But I've said it before. I will say it again. Evan, we are back, man. I cannot remember a time in recent history where we have been more back than we are right now. Buccaneers football back this week.
Hard to believe. Yeah, like I said, it sort of, I think the summer helps, right? Kind of accelerate that once the summer months hit, everything, you get the 4th of July, and then next thing you know, it's late July, and training camps, right? And like I said, soon before we know it, it'll be August 9th, and we'll be watching a preseason game and then talking about it shortly after. So yeah, definitely crazy, but definitely ready for it.
Absolutely. With that being said, you can find the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And, of course, Buccaneer news as it happens. You can follow my co-host, Evan, on Instagram at Bucs_Daily. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL. And check out his written work at BucsNation.com. Training camp is back. Bucs are back in the building. You got anything in the hopper?
So gonna have a written version of the training camp battle. So if you're somebody who likes to also, read articles, stuff like that, head over to BucsNation.com. Also, might have, and I think I sort of do this every year, a Bucs with the most approve in 2025. Not necessarily guys that are on the bubble for the roster, just guys who could use a big year. Maybe a guy like Chris Brazwell could be on there, right? He has a lot to prove. Guys that, maybe they have been productive, but they could use that next step. So yeah, stay tuned to BucsNation.com for all that good stuff. And then also coming up here on our Cannon Fire Podcast YouTube channel. If you're listening to this on audio, we appreciate you. But if you want a little bit more content coming up here, we have a ton of content throughout the entire season. But now that the season's coming up, we will be starting up again with our YouTube content, and it'll be positional group previews, which if you guys remember, we did it last year, but then we also did positional group reviews after this past season. Now we're going to do previews, going to look at each room and just sort of analyze it. Quick, videos, quick, almost daily content for you guys. So those will be coming out here periodically over the next 2 or 3 weeks or so. So stay tuned for them as well.
Looking forward to it. Last but not least, you can find myself, Instagram, and Twitter at Rhetticus, RHETT, If you follow me, I will follow you back. And please check out the Rondé Barber Show. We have been working on that the last couple of months, and I have had the honor of producing that show. And it really is a dream come true. I do have to kind of pinch myself every now and again. But we just recently, last week, did an episode with new Buccaneers offensive coordinator Josh Grizzard. Got some really cool intel from him. And he actually talked explicitly about the one player on the offensive side of the ball who has to step up for his offense to work the way that he hopes it will. So that is a great listen. Make sure you check that out. The WFLA YouTube channel. You can also find it on all of the podcast platforms. Just search Rondé Barber Show. But incredibly excited for that. That's going to be ramping up as the Buccaneer season continues. So excited for you guys to check that out. That's it. That's the show. I don't think I have anything else. I don't think there's anything else I have to plug. I think I got through all of my bullet points here. And with that being said, we will talk to you in the next episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish. We will see you in the next one. Until then, and as always, thank you for listening, and go Bucs.